Welcome to Reconnect, the podcast dedicated to sharing and defending the good news of Jesus Christ. The word religion comes from two root words, re, again, and lig, connect. Together, religion means reconnect. The Bible reveals that it is through Jesus Christ alone that we are reconnected into a right relationship with God. Reconnect us, O Lord. Hey, this is Andy Rasman, another episode of Reconnect. We are going to be looking at a website today, an apologetics website called Proof That God Exists. I will not lead most of this right now during at least this first segment. I will hand it over to Ben Fisher, who's been absent for quite a while from this podcast, but he is back doing what he loves, presuppositional apologetics. And there are three students here. Can you guys introduce yourselves briefly, just so everyone knows kind of your name and voice when you do speak?
Hi, I'm Trevor.
I'm Susan.
And I'm Matt.
You gotta talk into it a little bit better.
Oh, well, here we go. I'm Matt, and I sound like this.
All right. That's perfect. Okay, and here we go. Ben.
Like Andy said, my name is Ben, and we are going to go through a website called www.proofthatgodexists.org and see what these students here have to say about the answer choices and what we find here on the website. So the first page is titled Truth, and you're given four options. The first option is absolute truth exists. The second option is absolute truth does not exist. The third option is I don't know if absolute truth exists. And then the fourth option is I don't care if absolute truth exists. So you guys can take turns, or if you want to vote on it, it doesn't matter. Go ahead and choose an answer choice that you'd like for us to click on.
Let's go with absolute truth exists then.
Okay, sweet. So we'll go ahead and click on the first answer choice, absolute truth exists. And it leads us to a second page titled Knowledge. So we're given two choices here. And the first one is I know something to be true. And the second one is I don't know anything to be true.
All right, let's go with the second one. I don't know anything to be true.
Okay, so I don't know anything to be true. Go ahead and click on that. Great. So the statement that you just claimed, that you posited, I don't know anything to be true. Is that a true statement or is it false?
Oh, I see what you did there. Oh, okay.
What did I do? Can you tell us what you think I did there?
Well, by saying is it true or
did?
false, you have to admit that what you said is to be true, and therefore admitting that there's truth.
Oh.
So
perfect. So you do know something to be true.
It would be true.
Okay.
So
now, what if you would have said false? Would that have made any sense?
No, you would have.
No,
been contradicting yourself.
Paradox.
So
right, that's right. Contradicting yourselves. To say that I don't know anything to be true is a false statement, then exactly you would contradict yourself. Cool. So we clicked on that it is true that I know something to be true, or that I don't know anything to be true. And it gives us another knowledge squared, or I guess the second knowledge page here. And the two answer choices are I know something to be true or I don't know anything to be true. And at the bottom it says this is not a glitch, so think about it.
And Susan obviously thought about it, and she knows what to pick this time.
all right, I know something to be true.
Okay, so I know something to be true. Wonderful. Okay, so that brings us further down the path here, and we're brought to a page titled Logic. And we have two choices, logic exists or logic does not exist. Is it Matt, right?
Yes.
Would you like to choose this one?
Let's go for logic exists.
Okay, logic exists. It's a good choice. Okay. Here's the second part about logic. Is logic universal or is logic person relative? So depending on which person you talk to, logic could change? Or is logic universal across the board?
No, logic is a personal relative.
You think it's personal relative?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so let's click on logic is person relative. Okay. So we're given another page titled logic is person relative with a question mark, and we're given two choices, but they are the same. Logic is universal and logic is universal.
Trapping me in a corner there. Let's go for the one on the
Really? Because my logic says that it's okay to have two answer choices that are the same. Because it's relative to me.
I see what you did there, and I like that.
That's right. And so, laws of logic that we know of, such as, A equals A and B equals B, and therefore A cannot equal B. Here, this would be a contradiction, right? To have two answer choices that are the same. So we're beginning to realize that yes, logic is actually universal, because if we talk to people different than ourselves, then we'll find that it does not change. Oh, whoops. The next part, you guys can choose. It doesn't matter. Is logic unchanging? So logic does not change, or logic changes. Trevor, do you want to chime in?
I have a feeling I know what'll happen if I pick the second one, so let's go with the first.
Okay, so you want to? Would you like to click on logic changes?
No, not really.
No.
So logic. does
Okay,
not
so
change.
let's go to logic does not change. Okay. Another claim about logic, about it being immaterial or not. So logic is not made of matter, or logic is made of matter. What do you guys believe?
I mean, what does that even mean? Logic is made of matter.
Matter. So matter has a mass, right?
No.
Yes. All matter has mass.
Okay, yes.
Okay, matter has
Yeah.
mass, yes.
Matter has mass.
Okay. All right.
Basic biology here.
No, it's okay.
Physics, but
Physics.
Well, actually,
Physics, biology, chemistry, the sciences, right? They deal with matter. So something that has mass, something that you can touch, measure, empirically gathered data about. So what do you guys think? Logic is not made of matter, or logic is made of matter?
I've never actually thought about that before. Let's go. It's not made of matter.
Okay.
Just see what happens.
All right. So logic is not made of matter. Wonderful. I think we've almost reached the end here. Okay. So if you guys can follow the trail that we've been going down so far, and remember our answer choices. Remember what was the first thing that we looked at? Truth, right? Mm-hmm. So there is such a thing as absolute truth, because when you say that there is no such thing as absolute truth, you're making a truth claim, right? We talked about logic, which it is not changing. It's universal and it's immaterial, right? So you can't touch or measure logic, right? It's just something that exists, right, in reality, in space and time. But it does. It's
not
immaterial.
Yeah.
It's immaterial, right? And so we're given this final answer choice, and it's called the proof. So the proof that God exists button. Go ahead and click on that. And now we're brought to a page with a more explanation. Okay. And the big title listed here is the proof that God exists is that without him, you couldn't prove anything. Okay. So there's three things: truth, knowledge, and logic are all necessary to prove anything. And if you assume them, right, you also need to give an account for them. How are we able to actually come up with absolute truth, right? Or know things for certain, or use logic in our arguments to prove things, right? And as an as an unbeliever, all right, you are free to use all three, right? You can know things to be true for certain, and you can use logic. But as an unbeliever, there is no justification for those items that are necessary to prove anything. And so that would thus follow that the only way, right, that we can account for being able to know things for certain and use reasoning, is there anything here in this universe empirically in a naturalistic worldview that can account for those things? Can you guys think of anything? Anything that we could use to know for certain that we're not just all brains in a vat?
Could I use my brain to discern that?
Sure. What do you guys think? Do you think you could use your senses to know things?
Well, yeah, that's like the way that people gather data is using their senses.
Okay.
But
right. So how do you know that we're talking with each other right now?
you can hear it and
Okay.
see mouths moving and
Okay, sweet.
got that a whole
So
thing.
you're relying on your senses, okay? But let me ask you this. How can you be sure that your senses are accurate? How do you know that you're not just seeing an illusion right now?
One thing that suggests that your senses are accurate, at least, is that you have a lot of different senses and they're all consistent with each other. See, I see you talking and I also hear you talking, right?
Okay.
So if they all agree, it makes it improbable that it's something random, at least.
Okay, that's true. But computer programs can be non-random, right? Generated processes. So, such as in a video game, right? If you guys play video games where you can move your character around, logically, if you move the stick forward, right, your character walks. If you swing your sword at an enemy, and you hit it, right? Yeah,
Assuming that you hit it.
yeah, you'll see that that enemy is affected, right? So here, somebody has programmed certain parts of the video game to logically work with one another, right? So how do we know that we're not all just part of a video game that's been programmed? On a high level.
This is called the problem of criterion in philosophy.
Okay.
And the simple answer is that technically you don't know, but you can still like decide to believe in certain things, which everyone in practice does. I mean,
Yes.
nobody actually truly thinks that they don't know anything.
That's true. But if you talk to a crazy person in an insane asylum, would they be able to know that they are actually insane?
Depends on how they're insane.
Well, isn't there a thing?
Is that even active? Yes? No?
I mean, it depends on the severity of the insanity, probably, because maybe some insane people know that they're insane, but
That they're fake, that they're actually trying to go insane because they want to escape reality.
I mean, you can do that, but
I think
it's pretty
I digress.
pretty hard to damage your brain to a point where you don't even know what's real or not. Some people are born with this, and that's why it goes into diagnosis, because it just goes over and over and it starts to degrade the brain. But if you were to use like a substance, you'd have to use so much of that substance to destroy what is
And you
real
have to
and what's
take
not.
the weight of people's like opinions. So insane person opinion is not going to hold as much gravity as a person that is normal and functioning well.
It's true.
And you could see that pretty clearly.
These are all good answers.
So
I love it.
Yeah. What is the topic we're covering again? What's the basic question we were trying to answer?
Basic question. Remember, proof that God exists.
Proof that
and
God
so
exists.
I'll bring it back here. And Trevor, I like how you brought up like how nobody like truly lives in a way that they don't know anything, right? Because we're not all just jumping off a cliff, or ramming our cars into people that make us angry on the freeway, right? Because we know that there's going to be physical consequences for that. right? So we're not living in a reality that we think is fake, right? We're all living in a world that we know things for certain, that they will happen, if we do them. So bringing it back to the original question is that outside of someone that has infinite knowledge, there's no way to determine or account for, not determine. There's no way to account for the things that we can know for certain.
Right, which
And
is
so-
why, like, when you ask an unbeliever where their morals come from, they can't really give you an answer.
But they do have morals, right?
Right, because they don't have a higher law that they ascribe themselves to. So
That's
that
right.
kind of
So
ties in.
Ravi Zacharias, one of his famous quotes is, if there is a moral law, there must be a moral lawgiver.
Right.
And that also goes into what it's kind of a tangent, but it's also one way to prove that God exists, is that morality is universal as well, right? So proof that God exists is that without him, right, we can't account for knowledge. We can't account for truth. We can't account for logic, So when people hear the word proof, they're usually trying to think of or trying to visualize, hard proof, things that you can touch, right? Things that you can measure. But the proof that we're talking about here is actually intellectual proof, right? Which still also holds a valid point in any argument, right?
Absolutely.
Well,
Yeah, Trevor, were you going to say anything?
yeah, in regard to the proof, I think technically someone could say that they'll just arbitrarily choose to believe that the world they live in is real without believing that a God made it such. It would just be that. It would be an assumption. There would be no particular reason to assume that. But technically you could just say, I choose to blindly assume that.
And that's all that you're left with without God is just assumptions, right? If you get real deep down in arguing with unbelievers, with atheists, those that don't believe that there is a God, they will almost always come back to, when you ask them how they can know things for certain, they will say that I'm pretty sure, that this is, why I'm able to know things. But they cannot say, without defaulting back to God, how they're actually able to know things for certain.
Right. I think if they looked a little deeper, like if they actually started searching for evidence and stuff like that, they would find that a world without God really isn't probable, that the things that happen around here are not just random events, and that maybe they just haven't looked deep enough and really found that kind of thing. Like the evidence that scientists give, and like atheist scientists, they don't really explain it that well, and so then people just blindly go along with that, and they haven't really researched it for themselves, I think.
Or they're in such a set worldview that they try to find answers, anything else, without explaining an explanation for God, right? And usually, people will blame Christians about, well, you thought, or you just say that anything that you can't explain, is that, oh, God made it that way, right? Or God did it. But really, when you dig deep down into an atheist worldview, they say the same thing, but instead they'll say, "Oh, it's a mystery. Like we'll find out one day, right? We'll find out one day."
In terms of like science, I guess. Neither atheism or theism really fall under the domain of science. It's not really any more scientific to say there's not a God or if there is a God, because you can't observe either way. So
especially when they're
neither
trying
of those
to,
are scientific claims.
True.
They're
explain
not.
past events.
Logic can address those questions, but it's really not in the domain of science.
You're correct. It's not scientific, right, to say that there is or is not a God. However, science is a way of knowing, right? And that's how we're able to know things about our natural world in our universe, right? Is through through observation, through experimentation, through gathering data and evidence, right? And that's how we know things, right? That's how we know so much about how our bodies work, how the physics of this universe are able to work, is through science. Now, that whole knowledge part of science is where you get trapped up as an atheist, right? Because without God, there's no way to account for that knowledge. So, in a sense, what we're saying is that as Christians, what we're saying is without God, science would not be possible. Okay? Because there's nothing here in this universe that can give us that ability to know things besides God. Right. Like we talked about, truth, knowledge, and logic. Those things are very, very hard to fit into a purely naturalistic worldview. Like you guys said, logic is immaterial.
Yep.
So how does a naturalist account for that then, right? If matter is all there is, then where's this immaterial stuff come from?
Yeah, I don't think they can explain that, really.
So what's next on this thing? You hit continue and it tells you what? Jesus is God?
Yeah, let's hit
it.
So it says the proof that God exists is that without him you couldn't prove anything. Continue. What do you believe? I believe that God exists. I do not believe that God exists.
I think we should take the route of I do not believe that God exists. Just
okay.
I mean,
let's go ahead and click on that one. I do not believe that God exists. Choice.
All right.
So we're given to going backwards or exiting the page. What happens?
Let's go back. Or
okay, why would it give you the exit option?
Because that's what some people do right about now.
Yeah,
I think because they've laid out. Go ahead, Susan.
Oh, sorry. That I mean, at this point, people would be getting frustrated, so they really don't have another answer for you.
Okay.
So I just leave if you don't agree with it by now or see any substantial evidence. There's no reason to stick around, really, if you still don't.
So what happens when we click on exit?
Thanks.
There you go. Disneyland is the answer.
And
the happiest place on earth.
Can you go back to the first page?
Yeah.
The very first page. Just go back to proofthatgodexists.org.
So it legitimately takes you to the Disneyland website to order tickets.
Because what else is there? It's either God or Disneyland. It's a joke. Okay.
It really is.
So here on this first page, you guys didn't choose the answer choice, but if you click on I don't care if absolute truth exists, go ahead and click on it. Then it brings you to the same website, to Disneyland. So in a sense, it's a little bit of a poke, right? A little bit
it's a good poke.
Of fun being made there, where basically if you don't care about truth, then you might as well just go to a theme park and enjoy this life while you can, right? Mm-hmm. Because if there's no truth, if there's no God, really, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what you do. And do you have to go?
Yeah, maybe.
Okay.
Thanks for playing,
Trevor.
Yeah. Thank you for your time, Trevor. God bless you. Enjoy your weekend. Yeah, we're doing this on a Friday with a few minutes left in the class. There was a bell. So these students stayed after class 10 minutes already. Whew. So I don't know if Susan's going to leave now.
I can stay if we're still going.
No, let's just ask you a quick question.
Okay.
What do you think about this whole website far? This whole idea of arguing that God exists by asking these types of questions.
I think it's a good way. I think it kind of is a different approach than most people are used to, and that it kind of leads you through a path kind of thing. But I also think it's easily frustrating if someone isn't already in the correct mindset of like, we're actually going to figure something out, that it could be potentially frustrating. Like that it kind of like leads you back to the same places, and the one with the contradictory answers, that maybe they'd be like, well, this is stupid, and just leave. Mm-hmm. But for someone that actually cares, that it would lead them through a good thought process at least. And then the explanations at the bottom really help, I think.
Is this something you would feel comfortable using yourself?
I think so. I mean, if I had questions about it, I would kind of walk through this.
Now, what do you think about what we've been covering so far in the apologetics class, where we're arguing for the historical reliability of the Gospels? After that, what did Jesus claim about himself? From there, is he God or is he not God? What best fits all the evidence, all the events around his life that we have? And then from there, looking at the evidence for the resurrection. And that would show not just who God is, not just that there's a God, but also who God is. What do you think about that approach versus starting with this?
I think it's good as well, just to really lay the foundation of this is a historical book and this really did happen. And then you kind of get on the level of many people and scientists of this day and age that they want cold, hard proof that this actually did happen. But I don't know. I really like the logic idea just because people are they really have no idea when it comes to that. And a lot of people believe in absolute truth and don't really realize the obvious fallacy that goes with that, or the relative truth and that it doesn't really exist. So I think that, both are really necessary, mm-hmm. that you need to have some positive proof and that you also need to kind of like ask questions and really get to the bottom of things with other people when they have problems with this.
And do you fully understand or feel like comfortable explaining to someone why to have absolute truth, you must have a God?
Yeah.
You do?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, it makes
How
sense
would you
in my
do
head.
it?
Because that's hard for me personally. So
for
I didn't
relative
know about
truth and stuff?
No, just like to say absolute truth means there must be a God. Like for me, it's hard to connect those dots. So I didn't know if it was for you or not. Mr. Fisher over here, he has no problem doing it. This is his go-to, I think, in a lot of ways.
The absolute truth thing?
Well, yeah, being a biology teacher in the past, there's a lot of evidence for God in the biological world, right, that we could point to. But at the same time, secular scientists can easily find, more evidence.
Oh, yeah.
Just to counter like every evidence that you give. And so it's a never-ending battle, basically, where if I present evidence, as a Christian, I can see totally like how it works in favor of pointing towards a creator, right? But at the same time, another colleague or friend or another scientist that looks at it will see it completely differently. And so that's the thing about worldviews is that you have to be aware of which worldview you have,
right.
In order to realize what conclusions that you're coming to, right? Because a secular worldview will come to secular conclusions. Christian worldview will come to conclusions that point to a creator. And so there begins to be more of a neutrality, I believe, when you dig into the battle of worldviews instead of evidence, because really you're just saying which worldview is better, right? Which one makes the most sense, right? And when you line it up like that, the battle is clearly won by a creation worldview,
right?
Because we have a God that allows us to know things for certain, that we're able to see where logic came from, right? And how you get absolute truth. Mm-hmm. Absolute truth is something that does not come from the human mind, right? Is it absolutely true for something to be certain on the other side of the universe without
Let me
humans?
interject. Why can't it come from the human mind? How would you answer that, Susan? Because I know you said you like this approach. Like, why couldn't absolute truth come from the human mind?
I don't think it's a high enough power. I mean, if a human's making a human rule, then it wouldn't weigh so guiltily on a person to break that human law. I mean, obviously murdering is wrong, and you just know innately that murdering is wrong, but how could that come from another human that you would just know so deep inside of you that you can't kill another person, and that guilt would be on you? If you're just like, oh, well, they made this rule, and I'm a human too, so I'm on the same level they are, which means that I should be able to do whatever I want to and make my own rules. And so then all of a sudden you have millions of different rules that you could be making.
Gotcha. So one rule over us all, you have to have one person overall.
Right. Which
Yeah.
would lead you back to a higher power.
Yeah.
God.
Because none of us are eternal either, even if we don't
Right.
have one
That's right.
great
And
Donald Trump over the entire world. He's not going to live forever.
no. And imagine if all humans were wiped out from existence, right? If the earth didn't have humans, right? Would things like logic and absolute truth still exist?
Yeah.
Totally. That's right. And so to say that logic is a construct of the human mind, right? Or that we can determine absolute truth, through our reasoning, it's circular because we're using our reasoning to justify our reasoning.
Yeah.
Right? And it's just hey, I'm using the word logical here, but it's just not logical for humans to be the source of something like absolute truth.
Cool. Awesome. Well, we'll take a break there, and when we come back, we'll talk a little bit more about this website.
Cool, thank you.
Many different people have many different opinions about the person and work of Jesus Christ. Latter-day Saints, or Mormons, believe Jesus is our spirit brother, along with Lucifer. Jehovah's Witnesses believe Jesus is actually Michael the Archangel. Muslims believe Jesus was the precursor prophet to Muhammad. Scientologists believe that Jesus was a tool for mind corruption. But what should you believe about Jesus? Better yet, how do you talk about him among these other views? Robot Jesus and Three Other Jesuses You Never Knew is a book authored by me, Kyle Bashirs, that explores how Jesus is viewed within Mormonism, Jehovah's Witness, Islam, and Scientology for the purpose of aiding fruitful dialogue about the gospel. It's available now on Amazon in paperback and Kindle editions. Check out dearephesus.org for a free chapter. That's dearephesus.org, and just click on the resource tab. There are many different Jesuses in the world. Are you prepared to give an account for the Savior Jesus?
To financially support Reconnect, visit contradictmovement.org and order your copy of Contradict, They Can't All Be True. Contradict stickers and tracks are also available. Again, that's contradictmovement.org.
Those were some very bright students. They have all left to enjoy their weekend. I'm glad they hung around. Okay, Ben, this website is Proof That God Exists. It's a .org. I don't know if we really said at the start here, whose website is this?
This website, if anyone can correct me if I'm wrong, but I am almost certain that it is Psi 10 Bruggencate's website, and he is a presuppositional apologetic
Apologist?
Apologist. Sorry, my website just loaded there. Apologist, and he has been gathering some popularity and some infamy in the secular circles. And so this is his website. He revamped it recently, probably within the last year or so.
It has to be his site because on the About This site, it says About Psi.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's definitely his.
For sure.
Again, I'm almost pretty sure that's it.
I'm pretty sure.
That's pretty sure. Sweet. All right, so how long have you been using this site?
I've only used it a little bit, the past couple years or so.
Yeah.
And it was mainly just with my students in our side mini unit during the year that we covered about, the proof of creation in our biology classes. Yeah. So
And I like how you explained it just then. In biology, you can get into these back and forth tussles.
Yeah.
And it's just, you got evidence, I got evidence, but sometimes we have the same evidence and we're just interpreting it differently.
Totally, based on our worldview.
So let's just cut to the chase and go, if you're an atheist, you can't even trust the senses you're using to discern this evidence the way you're discerning it.
You can't account for your senses being accurate.
Gotcha.
Right. Like, so we're not saying that atheists don't have senses that work, right? They do. They can use knowledge and logic and reasoning, but the only problem is that they can't account for it.
Which means you can't really trust them to be relaying accurate information, right?
Well, based on their worldview, you couldn't, right?
Yes, based on the worldview.
Yeah.
Because like you said, they could be a brain in a vat.
Yeah.
They could be a computer program.
Yeah.
So they think what they're seeing is real, but really they're a brain in a jar getting, some sort of signal sent to them. Maybe.
Who knows?
Maybe.
That's the thing. It's if there is no God. Okay, so contradict movement. Either there is a God or there isn't a God. Right? You can't have both. If there is not a God, right? If that is the world that we live in, there is no way to trust our senses for sure.
All right. So let's go back through this just a little bit more, play around with it.
Sure.
So absolute truth exists. What did we say initially? It does, right?
I think they chose absolute truth does not exist.
So let's try it just one more time. Absolute truth does not exist. And then that's absolutely true or it's false.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty good, right?
Yeah.
I don't think we went this route.
No, I think we did. And
we went absolutely true?
Maybe.
Or false?
I think, hold on. Let's go back.
This is awesome. Absolute truth does not exist. Absolutely true or false.
Yeah.
And so if it's absolutely true, it probably takes you back to the first page, and it does.
Yeah, it does.
So it takes you back to the first page. So now, at this point, you would have to click absolute truth exists.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to see what it says if you did false on that one.
Okay.
So absolute truth does not exist. Absolutely true or false. Let's click false. And it takes you to truth squared, to the second truth page, which is
this was the original page, but it's
and it just says this is not a glitch.
Yeah, think about it.
Okay.
Because when you say that absolute truth does not exist, and you're saying that that's a false statement, what you're saying is that it does exist.
Yeah, it's self-contradictory.
Yeah.
To say there's no such thing as absolute truth. Well, you just made an absolute truth statement because you said no, right? This is never the case. So the thing you just said is that we don't know for sure if that's true or false, right? I mean, if your worldview is correct, so basically they're contradicting themselves. They're making an absolute claim that says there's no absolute truth.
Yeah.
And if there really is no discernible absolute truth, you would have to actually say, I don't know if absolute truth exists to be more accurate, right? Is that the option?
Let's choose that one. I don't know if absolute truth exists.
And then I don't know if absolute truth exists, absolutely true or false, which is the same situation we
exactly because
before.
When you say it's false and you're saying that it does exist, and then if you're saying it's true, then you are lying to yourself because you just said that you don't know. But if you say that it's true that you don't know if truth exists, it doesn't work.
Cool. So this first page gets you to either go to Disneyland or admit that absolute truth exists.
Basically, yeah.
And so then absolute truth exists. And then, this is where we went the first time. I know something to be true or I don't know anything to be true. And so let's just skip this time to I know something to be true because I like how he played it. When you do I don't know anything to be true, it just asks you I don't know anything to be true or false. So it puts you in that same situation to have to admit that you know something to be true. And then from there, logic exists or logic does not exist. And I think they did logic exists,
right?
Yeah,
they did logic exists. Yeah.
So let's say logic does not exist just to see what pops up. Logic does not exist. I use logic to conclude that logic does not exist. I came to my conclusion about logic arbitrarily.
Let's choose the second one.
Yeah, I think so.
I came to my conclusion about logic arbitrarily.
And let's just read the thing, because each page has like a little sentence on it that kind of helps explain it. At the bottom of this page, it says, one interesting thing about denying logic is that since you do not believe in logic, you actually do believe in logic. If there were not logic, then you could have no problem with that contradiction.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's what I told them.
Mm-hmm.
Is when they had the two answer choices that were the same.
Mm-hmm.
Trevor was like, there's something wrong here. And I thought, I jumped in and said, no. Actually, according to my logic, it's okay to have, answers that are the same in
That's
both
good.
choices. Yeah.
All right, so I use logic to conclude that logic does not exist. You would have to say that, right?
And again, that's contradicting.
Because you say arbitrarily, and then goes back to logic exists, logic does not exist.
Yeah.
And if it's arbitrary, then logic does not exist. Because you can really make up anything you want, right?
Exactly, yeah.
And so when you click that, it probably takes you back to the very first. No, it just takes you back to it. Again, I use logic to conclude that logic does not exist. So it will get you in this constant loop.
Mm-hmm.
Which is probably what Susan was saying. Could be frustrating for someone if they're like just always saying kind of the wrong answer and being trapped in this like never-ending sort of circle. All right, and then it says logic exists, logic does not exist. This is not a glitch. Think about it. Yeah, logic exists.
Logic exists. We are using logic right now to come to that conclusion.
Which then says logic is universal or it's relative. We already did the relative path.
Yeah, the person relative.
So logic is universal. Logic does not change, or logic changes. So logic does not change.
Did we click on logic changes?
I think so. Maybe not. Let's do it. Logic changes. Brings up logic does not change or logic does not change.
There we go.
Same thing, right?
Yeah, and it says down here at the bottom, keep in mind that the question is not whether or not our perception of logic changes, but whether or not logic itself can change. If you believe that logic changes, then for all you know, logic has changed, and contradictions are now valid. In that case, you would have no problem with contradictions.
Yeah, like the one above.
Yeah, where it gives you
great.
two of the same answer choices.
Cool, so it takes you back to make that decision, right? Of does it change, does it not change? So matter changes, matter does not change.
No, it says logic is not made of matter.
Logic is made of matter, and then it says matter changes, matter does not change. That's interesting. We didn't have this question before.
No,
did
we didn't go that route because they agreed that logic is not made of matter.
Okay, so matter changes or matter does not change. Matter changes, right? Tell me as a science guy.
Law of conservation of mass, or matter in this case, is saying that you cannot create or destroy matter.
But would it change, like in terms of form? Or
it could
change
into energy.
Because we're going to get to a point of there is no. We're going to get to a point of equilibrium eventually, right?
Well,
but matter still exists. It's not saying
Einstein's. I think that was his equation about E equals mc squared.
Yeah, but I don't know what it means.
E is referring to energy. M is
mass, or is it
mass, and then C is the speed of light.
Okay,
something like that. It's been a long time since I've looked at it, so I might get those variables off. But I know though that it basically describes a relationship between energy and matter.
Okay.
In that, for example, one can change from one to the other, but you are not. But the mass still stays the same, and so it's kind of hard to wrap your mind around. But think of energy. Such as in the sun, right? You have an incredible amount of energy there in a star, and you can from that energy, like that's where elements can be formed, right? Based upon electron configuration, based upon how many protons and neutrons, right, are in one place, and so that's where energy and mass can change from one to the other.
Yeah.
Yeah, but energy and matter. Excuse me. Yeah.
What about changing substance? Does that count as matter changing? Like solid in a liquid? Has the matter changed? Or
That's
is the matter the same?
That's the state. That's the state that
the
it's
state's
in.
changed,
Yeah.
but the matter hasn't. Is that what people
Yeah,
would say?
it's because it still has the same mass. Law
Oh,
of
okay.
conservation of mass. Yeah.
Gotcha. Because when I hear this, I'm maybe even thinking like that's what it could mean. You know, like solid to a liquid or solid to a gas. So because that's what I'm thinking, I'll say matter changes just to see what it says.
Okay, let's go
Because
click on
honestly,
matter changes.
I've never thought through this. I would think matter, substance can change somehow, or state could change.
Okay, so we're brought back to the logic is immaterial or not made of matter or made of matter.
Yeah, and
And
I
the
would say obviously it's not made of matter.
The explanation is to reach this step, you admitted that logic does not change and that matter changes. Therefore, it follows that you do not believe that logic is made of matter.
Oh, that's good.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely.
So
this is still helpful to show that logic is not material, which means the materialist or naturalist would have to be out.
yeah. Now, when they talk about matter changing, I don't think they're thinking of law of conservation of mass like I was. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like how you cannot create or destroy mass. I think they're thinking of matter changing in the way that it's configured. Like
Yeah,
you
like
were
I
talking
was
about,
thinking.
like
Like,
phase changes
My
in
ice
water.
cream cone melts. Like,
Exactly.
It's different. And then it evaporates eventually.
Yeah, or
becomes
you know,
a sticky
if
glue.
you burn a tree, it turns into
Mm-hmm.
ash, right? So you basically just have the carbon left over, and a lot of stuff was just released as carbon dioxide gas in the atmosphere. So
Yeah.
I guess it would follow that matter changes according to this.
Cool. Which means we just get to where we were. Proof that God
Unless-
exists.
Let's go back. Hold on.
Wanna go back?
Yeah, let's go back to matter does not change.
Okay. Matter does not change. What does it tell us then?
Seriously.
Go back or exit.
If you believe that matter does not change, there's no point in continuing. You'd have to believe that you are never going to die, and in that case, you need more help than this site can offer. Repent while you still can.
Okay.
So I was correct in my hunch that
Yeah.
he was talking about how matter can change form.
Okay.
From one to another.
So go back.
Right. Let's go back.
All right. So matter changes. of
Matter
course.
changes. And then this contradicts us because we said that logic does not change, but matter changes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so
Which means
which
logic's
means
not
that
matter.
logic is not made of matter.
Yep. And so that proves God exists because as you illustrated before. All right. So then it says, I believe that God exists. I do not believe that God exists. Let's say I believe God exists. If you've reached this page without going through the proof, please click the proof. For those who have gone through the proof to get here, it may have been a huge step to finally admit that God exists. I could imagine. I bet it is for some people. While it may be a relief to finally make such an admission, it is just the first step, not the last. The Bible teaches that even demons believe in God and tremble. James 2, verse 19. Since you affirm your belief in God, you should be better able to understand the answers to the questions below. I hope that God will use these questions and answers to guide you further in your journey. What are some of God's characteristics? Okay, and it gives the answers. Could God have used fallible people to write an infallible book? And it gives answers. So all these are just like, it's 20 questions.
Yeah, it's kind of like a study guide.
Yeah. And so this is no longer quizzing you. It's like, here's questions and here are the answers. I don't really see Bible verses quoted in these, but some of them are certainly needing Bible verses. Like, what is heaven like? How do I become a Christian? Okay, I'm a Christian. What now? That's pretty cool. I like it. And then there's a page on the site called Other World Views. It's kind of interesting.
Oh, yeah.
He initially, once you admit that there's God, goes straight to the God of the Bible, right? But I guess more needs to be said about why, if God exists, it must be the God of the Bible, right? Which I think is more what I was kind of saying. You just start with the Bible being true. But It seems like he just went, admit there's a God, and now I'm just going to automatically tell you it's Jesus. So let's say, there are only two worldviews, God and not God. Scripture tells us that all the gods of the peoples are worthless idols, but the Lord made the heavens. Psalm 96:5. Technically, the only theistic worldview is the Christian worldview, as there are no other, quote, gods, only idols. Wow, what do you think about that statement? That's interesting.
Yeah, it's interesting.
So it's not counting them as gods.
For someone who is Muslim, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or
they're not theistic worldview.
Or Mormon.
Or Jewish even.
Yeah, Judaism. They would say that, how would you not know that those gods are the real God?
Mm-hmm. Wow, this is pretty cool. So he has worldview tracks. He has 8 of them. For atheism and agnosticism, cultural Christianity, Eastern philosophies, Jehovah's Witness, Judaism, Mormonism, Islam, and Roman Catholicism. Well, want to just go through one of these today?
Sure.
Just for fun. Which one would you like to look at?
Islam.
And why not? Islam. I got a good feeling I know what he's going to do, but let's see. Purchase worldview tracks here. Okay, front of the track. So it's loading. Mine is loading. Is yours loaded?
Yeah, it took a little while.
Okay. Wow, it's long. So questions. For Muslims, could you be wrong about everything you claim to know? No. Continue reading. Yes. See reverse. So I like this. It's giving different questions, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's the same thing. So let's say, could you be wrong about everything you claim to know?
Let's say no.
No, because most Muslims would probably say no. Because that's a big claim. Everything you know?
Yeah.
Because that means Islam would be wrong. They'd be admitting they could be wrong about Islam.
Yeah.
All right, so from here, according to Christianity, the God of the Bible is the source of all knowledge. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, Proverbs 1:7. And then Surah, which is the chapter, a book, or a chapter in the Quran. Surah 6, verse 115 says, according to Islam, Allah is the source of all knowledge. He is the all-hearing and the all-knowing. So Muslims believe that all knowledge is gained through revelation from Allah in the Quran, the Hadiths, and the book that is the Bible. So that's something with Islam, right? That they claim the Bible was also from God. Allah.
Yeah.
So the Quran claims that the words of Allah cannot be changed, with your claim that the words of Allah in the Bible have changed. All right, so they already are done, right?
Let's go back over that again here. So how do you reconcile the Quran's claim that the words of Allah cannot be changed with your claim that the words of Allah in the Bible have changed?
Gotcha. So I must have skipped over that. How do you reconcile? So that's the one. They have to deal with that, right? And then the other one they have to reconcile, the Quran's claim that the Bible, which predates the Quran, was unchanged at the time of Muhammad, with your claim that the Bible has been changed. Ooh. So at Muhammad's day, there was no mention of the Bible having been changed. But after Muhammad, then now that's what Muslims claim. The Quran's claim that Allah deceived Muhammad, and the Quran's claim that Allah is truth. Wow, the problem. Contradictions amount to lying, as opposing statements cannot both be true.
So basically what those things are saying is that in the Quran, it's saying that Allah is true all the time, unchanging, all-knowing.
Yep.
But at the same time, they're claiming that Allah has spoken through the Bible.
Yep.
And they're saying that the Bible has changed.
Yep.
So that would mean that Allah changes.
Right, so how can they be certain of what they know from the Quran?
Exactly. If they have a God that's changing.
Right, if the Bible changed at one point, has the Quran changed?
Yeah.
Or has Allah changed his mind about what he revealed in the Quran?
Yeah.
Even if maybe they could potentially historically prove that it hasn't changed, at least in the text. All right, so at that point, so how can you know anything, right? So that sends them to the reverse. But maybe some people want to keep moving, right?
Yeah.
So more problems are a God who is truth makes no sense with the possibility of deception. Truth cannot have the possibility of being false. A God who is love makes no sense without plurality in his being. God is one, however, without plurality in his being, he cannot be love, as prior to creating man, he could have had no one to love. I love that answer. A God who is perfect in justice makes no sense without a perfect payment for sin. Without a perfect payment for sin, God would be merciful in granting salvation, but unjust. I like that one too. That's one Muslims always point out to us.
What do they say?
They always like to say that it's not just or unfair for God to have someone else die for our sins. So for an innocent man to die for your sins is incorrect. That's not fair and it's not just. So God would not allow that. But what Sai is pointing out with this tract is that it would actually not be right for God to just forgive sins without any penalty paid.
Yeah, or without a perfect payment.
Yes, without a perfect payment.
Because
it wouldn't be just, is the idea. You just let sin off the hook, which is what Allah does.
Yeah.
Everyone's sins are just forgiven by his mercy if your good outweighs your bad. But your bad is still is going unpunished.
So he would be merciful in granting salvation, but unjust.
Unjust. Yeah. Let's just say Mother Teresa murdered one person.
Yeah.
But she did so much other great stuff. Does all that other great stuff, he's like, oh, okay, you were pretty good then. I'm going to let you off the hook for that one person you murdered. Yeah. Well, now you got someone, an unpenalized murderer in heaven, right?
That's right. There was no one to pay for her sin.
Yeah.
Perfectly.
But with us, if we're in heaven and if we've killed someone, I haven't yet, just in my heart maybe, according to Jesus.
Yeah.
I'm in heaven, that hatred I've had against my fellow man has still been paid for. Because Christ paid for it. What is your only hope in this life and the next? And it gives a bunch of verses. And I think, so what's your only hope in this life next? All the verses on the bottom I was seeing were the footnotes. Citations with Islam. So then it gives a bunch of verses from Islam. That's cool. And I think all those verses are what?
Oh, here's the backside. Remember the first question where it said,
"Gotcha."
If you could be wrong about everything you claim to know, then it basically says it's absurdity to make that claim. That you could be wrong about everything that you...
Gotcha.
Because if you could be wrong about everything, you can't really know anything at all.
Uh-huh.
Not even that. Like, not even that you couldn't know anything. You couldn't even know that.
Yeah, this is good. Love it.
So, yeah, what it says here is that the fact that you do know things exposes that you know that God exists, but you're stealing your foundation for knowledge from him.
I may have to buy some of these tracks.
Print them off, yeah.
I mean,
actually, it'd be hard to print off, yeah.
Yeah. Well, he kind of made it blurry, I think, online, so you couldn't maybe just print them. Doesn't it look a little blurry to you?
Yeah, you would literally have to go in and type everything out again.
Yeah, which wouldn't be too bad, but yeah, I mean, if they're pretty nicely
cheap,
cost, because it even has a section where if you bought it, you would put your church information here.
Yeah, totally.
So that it's personalized for where you're handing it out, which is really cool. Yeah, sweet. So that's the Islam one, and yeah, it leads people to Jesus, right?
Mm-hmm.
I love that. The possibility that you could be wrong about everything is absurd. If you could be wrong about everything, you really can't know anything at all. Not even that. Pretty interesting. And then it talks about how in Jesus we do know who God is, and he's let us know that we can trust our senses, that we can account for them, that now there is a way to account for logic and reasoning, and we know that because God has shown himself to us.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Through his son, Jesus Christ.
Yep.
And that's where you segue into the evidential apologetics, right?
Yep.
And you show them the historical accuracy of the Bible.
Yep.
So,
That's it.
Yeah, it's
and
great
just the last
resource.
line. Yeah, and the last line in the tract is the only answer and only hope in this life and the next is Jesus Christ.
Perfect.
And that's the good news, right? That Jesus did everything for you so that everything will be okay for you moving forward into eternity. So with that, go forth, share the gospel, consider to use proofthatgodexists.org. There seems to be a lot there, probably just even for Christians to go through. There's a lot of things, favorite quotes, the other worldview tracks. We only went through one of them. There's a link called Answer Anyone. So there's a whole lot there. A lot of resources on this page. I'm glad Ben showed it to me a few years back, and I probably should dig around on it a little bit more myself.
Yeah.
All right, guys. God bless you, and just remember it's in Jesus Christ and Him alone that we are reconnected into a right relationship with the Lord.
Your mission, if you choose to accept it, share this episode on all of your social media sites and with your email contacts, people who will benefit from listening to the show. Thank you for listening. Reconnect us, O Lord.